Come in here.
Hey, everyone. My name is John Carvalho. I am the president of Stono Capital and Divestopedia. I'm sorry that we're a little late. We just had some technical difficulties, but I am so excited for this topic. I've been wanting to do this topic for like a year now, and I've finally been able to pull it together with some awesome guests that we have. Joining me today, I have Michael Carter, who's kind of in the background here or kind of rejoining. So he will be definitely on, just turning on his camera. He's the managing partner at Carter Morse and Goodrich. We have Tony Hill, who's the principal at Trivest Partners. And we have Andrew Sherman, who has some big news for us today. He's just joined as a partner at Brown Rudnick. So welcome, everybody. I am so appreciative, grateful that you guys were able to join. And this is an awesome topic that we have today. So I think, again, Michael is just kind of coming in and out, trying to deal with some technical issues here. But we have a great audience. We have a great panel, and again, a great topic. So just a little bit of housekeeping here. We're going to do questions, Q&A in the last kind of 10 minutes of this webinar. So the Q&A box is open. Our chat box is also open. So if you guys want to say hi to our panelists, by all means, jump on there and please say hi. Hey, Michael, you're back.
Apologize.
No worries. All right. Well, you're back just in time because the first question is over to you. We're going to keep a real tight timeline on the agenda too. So I'm going to moderate this. Fair warning for the panelists that if I cut you off, I'm not trying to offend you guys. I just want to keep this on target and get through all the questions that we have. So Michael, this is a really broad question, but I think it's going to set the stage for our conversation today. How would you go about and define retrading?
So retrade, and by the way, thank you very much for having me here. It's a real pleasure and a real honor. A retrade is basically involving a buyer that basically changes the valuation, the terms and conditions right during the exclusive period. And so from a buyer's perspective, they found out something new and they had to change the valuation terms. And from a seller's perspective, you did a bait and switch. And so I'll just keep it simple, John.
Yeah, awesome. And so you made a couple of good points. So it's kind of like changing on prices and terms that have already been agreed and during the exclusivity period. Andrew, would you agree with that definition? Is there anything you want to add to that?
I would actually expand Michael's definition. I think there's, we'll get into this, I think, in your next question, but there's the legit retrade and there's the bullying retrade. And everyone on this webinar needs to know the difference between the two. But I've actually had some experiences of seller retrade. It's not always a one-way street. It's usually a one-way street. I agree with Michael. But, for example, here in the DC area, we work with a lot of government contractors. If a government contractor in the middle of the exclusivity period gets some very positive news, we call it a pleasant upside surprise, there could be some retrading on the seller side, which of course upsets the buyer just as much as sellers get upset when the buyer does it. So I think it's a two-way street, but usually going in the direction that Michael described.
Okay, interesting. I never really thought of that, where there could be a seller retrade and they come back and try to
upside news, good news, yeah. Good news that changes the economics.
Yeah, perfect. Tony, what do you think about the definition of retrade and how you see it playing out in the context of the transactions you work on?
Yeah, I think Andrew and Michael did a great job. I mean, on the PE side, we see retrading on both the sell side and the buy side. So we're very intimately just aware of how that works. I agree that the sell side retrade happens, especially in the last few years where it was a pretty frothy market. I think the only thing I would add to, their definition is to help contextualize why the retrade, which generally speaking is considered kind of a bullying move, why it's so prevalent. And I think that the simple explanation is that it's very effective. By the time a founder, especially a smaller business, less experienced business owner working with institutional capital, has reached, striking distance of the altar, they're ready to get a deal done. And I think a lot of times, buyers, both strategic and financial, kind of know that they have a temporary tactical advantage that they can press. So otherwise, I think that's a pretty good definition.
Yeah, I think that why my wife of 39 years may have still agreed to marry me. I tried to do the retrade, but we were so close to the altar, she said yes anyway.
Yeah, you bought the ring and you booked the hall, and then there was
She was all in. She was all in.
Yeah. So, I think one thing I've really found around this topic that it really kind of likes emotion, right? Like there's a lot of emotion around this topic. Michael, when I introduced the topic to you, you were all on board because, I think your initial email was, I hate retrade, right? So I think that's why this is such a great topic, is because it stirs a lot of emotion. Andrew, we talked about, and you kind of alluded to this, but what are these situations where retrades are actually appropriate and it's not as visceral as it might otherwise be?
Well, if you're listening carefully, you've already heard a slight difference between Michael and Tony's answer to the first question. What Michael's saying is this is like a dreaded situation, and most of the time, particularly if you're on the sell side, it's bullying, it's tactics, it's just not cool, right? Tony is presenting a much calmer, hey, it's just kind of part of the process. And if you're representing sellers, you need to warn those sellers that there could be a retrade. I think the takeaway from today is, when is it legitimate and when is it just a bullying tactic? Because nobody who's an M&A professional like the four of us likes things that are done that are just bullying tactics. What I will add is, and this supports Tony's point, the market has been so fluid and so dynamic, and the impact of COVID and other things, the resiliency of the capital markets, but also the great fluctuations and interest rates. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but in some cases, the retrade is situational, and it's a macro or microeconomic situation that's driving the retrade as opposed to deal specific. So, frankly, if I was a buyer on a deal that's dragging out and my interest rate cost of capital just doubled in the middle of the deal, I may need to do a retrade in order to justify the economics to my third-party financing sources. So I think we need to bucketize this conversation over the course of the next hour into, things that are market-driven or situational-driven versus just, the buyer woke up one morning and said, I think I want to pay less, or I think, as Tony implied, I've got the seller right where I want them, so why not pay less?
Yeah, no, great points, Andrew. And then Tony, adding to that, what are the situations that you've seen where, it's these retrades that maybe you have to come back to the seller and say, hey, like, the price that we initially thought is not the right price. We need to reconsider some things. When have those situations been seen as less emotional and more based on some factual elements in the transaction?
Yeah, well, first off, at Trivest, we actually have a strict policy against retrading. Just putting that out there. But they're the one
exception. A lot of deal flow now.
The one exception that we make is a situation where there has been a fundamental change in the facts or the information that was presented. So going to Andrew's point, kind of a situation specific change that is very material. And I think in that case, the way we look at it is, okay, look, rather than kind of, drop the kibosh and come in with some unilateral position on things, it's about talking to the other party, understanding the impact that this change in information or whatnot is truly having, and then putting our heads together to try and agree on a path forward. We're staunch believers that if nothing else, like we should at least give the business owner some time, right, to see if they can address the matter in some way. But if not, look, we'll do the best in our power to try to give them a way to win back any consideration that maybe had to be altered a little bit. But those occasions are far and few between here at Trivest. Generally speaking, we do like to stick to the terms of our LOI in the vast majority of the deals that we do.
Yeah. One of the reasons I really wanted you on, Tony, is because you have, like, Trivest had this marketing campaign, and I know it was more than a campaign. It was, like you said, it was part of your guys's, mandate that there's strict no retrading policy, and I thought that was really interesting in terms of how you handle deals. But one question that came in that's super relevant to what you had said, Tony, and maybe we can cover it right now. What is that thing that's could fundamentally happen in a transaction that would make you consider a retrade?
I think missing your targets in a big way, maybe losing a major customer, right, during diligence. On the flip side, I guess that if they win a huge customer, they have grounds to come back to us and, try to renegotiate things. But I would, I think those are the two main things, right? Just a gross gap in achievement versus target, and some major change. And I guess maybe personnel change too, or
Well,
some.
as Nick
or
just said,
background.
a big piece of litigation coming up
There
in
you
the
go.
middle of exclusivity. That was a good point, Nick.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
things of that magnitude.
Michael, I'll have you jump in here. Again, I know you have a really kind of, a different outlook, just, given that you focus mostly on the sell side. Where do you see situations where retrading might be appropriate?
I think, first of all, shout out to Trivest. We've closed transactions with them, and they have never retraded. So I was very glad that you were on the call.
Tony, you are going to win a lot of deal
Yeah,
flow.
Tony hit on the big ones: missing your sales and earnings forecast during the exclusivity period, a key customer coming unglued, or some new news there. I think the things that we also see are contingent liabilities like litigation coming to the forefront, HR issues, environmental issues that pop up that they wouldn't have known without going through the exclusivity and going through some deep due diligence. Key managers are always a key factor. We thought they were on board, and all of a sudden they're heading for the exits. And so that would be the sometimes gaps in insurance and that sort of thing. So, but those would be the issues that if you've done enough due diligence, the exclusivity period should be really confirmatory, not uncovering things that you should have known beforehand.
John, can I build on Michael's point, because he's raising a really important point?
Yeah, please. We got some time.
The quality and integrity of the diligence really governs here. And Michael's 1,000% right. If a seller and their advisors have done their job properly, and if Tony, as a buyer, has front-loaded his analytical process, the retrade really shouldn't be necessary unless it's like completely can't be controlled, some exasperate market condition or development in the business. But where I see a lot of retrading is where there's sloppy preparation for due diligence on the sell side, and there's kind of late due diligence on the buy side. We had a deal that retraded twice, and the buyer just kept adding new layers of due diligence, and each layer of new diligence uncovered more stuff, and it was happening upon the third extension of the exclusivity period. And at some point I called the buyer's counsel and I said, couldn't we have dealt with this like 6 months ago? Did we really need to drag this out in this way? So I think part of what you're hearing in Tony's confidence is probably Trivest's process that's sufficiently front-loaded that by the time we get to the next level of diligence, there's probably not going to be a circumstance that gets missed.
Yeah. Great points. Tony, rolling over to you on kind of this next thing that I want to cover, but from a real practical perspective, how would a buyer handle retrade? So, you've uncovered, these issues that are fundamental or material to kind of the understanding of the assumptions that you made in creating the initial terms in an LOI, but how would you practically go about, kind of communicating to a seller that, hey, we need to revisit the terms of the originally agreed LOI?
Very delicately. I kind of tipped my hand on this one on the last question, I think, but in these situations, more likely than not, there's going to be a very big difference of opinion between, the founder who's been operating this business for 30 years and the PE firm who's been in serious conversation with him for like 45 days. And so, kind of going back to my earlier point, it's about, I think setting the stage for a productive bilateral communication, right? Hey, what happened? Let's find out what the true impact is. And now let's think through, what those ramifications are and how we move forward. I think the founders who get really burned out there are the ones who don't have that kind of forum in which to explain their position and be listened to, and instead someone's cramming a new LOI down their throat. So again, not rocket science, but I think like anything else, just going in there, and being, a good faith actor and trying to really find a middle ground on how to proceed.
Michael, what are like situations where you've seen buyers? Obviously, you've seen lots of instances where buyers have come back and tried to retrade, deal terms. But where have you seen kind of instances where a buyer has done it properly and adequately, and what does that look like?
I think that what they've done is they've explained exactly what they thought, what information they had when they were signing the LOI, and then explain the difference. Sometimes it's the seller's fault. Or sometimes so it's either a sin of omission or commission where they just forgot to tell them some very, very important information. I'll put forgot in air quotes. Or sometimes it just wasn't discussed. And if the information is going to be uncovered by every single buyer there, then we just have to factor it in to the valuation and the terms and conditions. It would be something that they should sit down. Tony said it very well, to take it very, very seriously, make sure your credibility is intact, and explain explain the differences of day 90 versus the first day of signing the LOI.
And just expanding on that, Michael, how often does that work for you? Like, does that typically lead to a continued transaction, or does that lead to a failed transaction, or does it really depend?
If it's done in the credible way that I described, we almost always overcome it. We can overcome it with different type of structuring, different types of ideas on how to overcome the issue. But at the end of the day, if there's credibility there, and we know this issue is going to rise, whether we had signed with 20 other people, I can't remember a situation where it ended up in a failed transaction.
Yeah. Andrew, I'd love to get your experience, because you see both sides.
I mean,
a lot. What's your experience from the buyer side, and ones that do it well? How do they approach?
Let's all go back to middle school for 1 second, okay? A bully wants your lunch money, and you're not expected to get anything back in exchange, right? And that's what we all think of when it comes to bullies, or a bullying tactic, or a negotiation tactic in bad faith. My feeling is, if I'm on the sell side and the buyer wants to retrade, bring something to the table. Now, of course, it's going to be circumstantial. If it's something, as Michael said, that the seller significantly omitted, maybe there is no horse trade to be had. But if it's just a change in market conditions, a change in cost of capital, a change in, some development due to the diligence in the value proposition of the transaction, particularly strategic buyers, but sometimes all types of buyers, which we'll get to, I know, in a few minutes, but then bring something to the table. Like Michael said, bring a creative solution or series of solutions. It's supposed to be a negotiation, not a unilateral process. And so I think most sellers, as Michael said, want to hear the reasons, want to be able to absorb the reasons, and want to know, if I agree to the retrade, on price, what am I going to get back in terms of terms, or vice versa?
Yeah, great points. Okay, our next question to Michael here, and this was, I think, a very important question that a lot of our audience want to know. What can the seller do to protect against retrading? You already kind of mentioned that, if there's changes to the assumptions that were, they thought something was there at the timing of the LOI, and then through due diligence, they figure out that that's different. How do you kind of understand what those assumptions are at the signing of the LOI? And what are some other tactics that you use with your clients to help them protect against this, very kind of emotionally charged issue of retrading?
So, John, I'm going to kind of give you and I may take a little more time than I deserve, but 6 key points on how to avoid retrades. Number 1 is understand who you do business with, and so understanding who the buyer is, what their M&A track record is, how well do they know the industry, how well do they know your company, how much work have they done. A lot of people come to us and say, well, I'm days away from signing the LOI, and we find out they sent the tax returns and financial statements. So those are things. And then at the end of the day, do I trust them? And it's just something in a gut. Most CEOs or owners have good guts about that. But finding out really how much work they've really done, and where they are in the approval process. Number 2 would be understanding the basis of the valuation. And very often it's simply just a multiple of EBITDA, but what multiple, what EBITDA, what time frame, and really getting underneath and making sure it's part of the LOI. Very, very specifics on what is the key valuation metric that they're teeing off of. What you want to try to avoid is concepts like, continued growth in the company and likelihood that they'll hit their forecast for the year. that's a, huge hole that anyone can drive a truck through. So very often it's related to key managers signing up, quality of the technology, a technology review, determination of if there's any huge investments that need to be made, typically in capital expenditures, IP, and the contingent liabilities always comes up. So those, and put them in the LOI. So if they're not in the LOI, you're having a much different conversation about the retrade. Number 3 is, and it's really hard for owners to do this, don't oversell. Be as forthcoming as, I'm going to say as possible, be forthcoming. When they give you an answer, give them a straight answer. Don't give it a range. This is not selling widgets, but you're dealing with somebody that's going to be knowing your company just as well as you probably do. And that natural inclination of overselling just seeps into a lot of these conversations. We often have to rein our CEOs in and I'll just say, train them to make sure that they're just communicating differently in this situation than just with their customer. Number 4 is make your numbers during the exclusivity period. It's something that we are obsessed about. Don't oversell, don't in your budgets, make sure that you're hitting your numbers. We love it when our clients are exceeding our numbers during the exclusivity period. So if there's another thing that comes up, we have now something in our hip pocket. The key, and then the number 5 would be, our LOIs tend to be more detailed oriented. And very often when you're negotiating that LOI, you hear, well, we'll handle that in the exclusivity period. Well, I'd rather take an extra week, handle that issue, and then, put it behind you. So when the buyer, or when the seller has, I'll say, the leverage, make sure those key issues are negotiated. And then the last, and probably one of the most important ones, is be prepared. It is very frustrating for buyers that, now ask for things and they're just not being given to them in a timely manner, or it's now very, very different. And so that extra time preparing is something that a lot of sellers just want to get to the LOI and want to get to the exclusivity period. And it's just something that we just keep banging away at, making sure you are prepared for the most intense due diligence you've ever experienced. And we usually get the response, well, we had an audit. And that's just not going to cut it. So it's preparing them well is very, very important. So those would be my kind of 6
those are awesome 6 points. And Andrew, I want to get your take on what you've seen. But I mean, in some cases, do you see that buyers would almost prefer to have a very fuzzy and not as detailed LOI, so they can get into an exclusivity period and maybe could kind of use this tactic of a retrade?
Is that for Andrew?
Yeah, that's for Andrew.
Yeah, I think Michael gave such a great download. I'm like anxious to react to his 6 points, and we should probably write them up at some point and get them out to the audience, because everybody seems to be reacting very well to them as well. Just a couple of things I want to highlight real quick, and we can come back to that question if we have time. The due diligence process is supposed to be a two-way process. And, we all have been patting Tony on the back for Trivest's reputation in not retrading. And, that's part of something you would reveal. If you were a seller weighing 3 different offers, and one of them came from Trivest at maybe even a few dollars less than the competing offers, but you had a much greater certainty to close and a much reduced chance of a retrade, then the Trivest offer looks best. And so the due diligence must be two-way. Some firms have a real reputation for retrading, and retrading for any reason, legit or not legit. So I think that's part of it. And I can't emphasize Michael's point enough. Not only the integrity of the due diligence, but the transparency. I can't tell you how many times in my career sellers have said things to me like, well, we'll just sweep it under the rug and hope the buyer doesn't find out. Or I'd rather not disclose that to the buyer at this time. Well, when do you think you're going to disclose it? If it's not at this time, you think it's going to come out 30 days after closing? Because then we're just in litigation. So I'd almost still rather see a retrade than a post-closing dispute. And I'd like to see, I'd like to get Tony and Michael's take on that. But I think a retrade beats post-closing litigation any day of the week.
Yeah, Tony, jump in here. What have you seen from sell side advisors that have kind of seen and say, hey, that they've done a really good job in terms of protecting us from retrading? Like, really, as Michael had mentioned, doing a great job of taking that extra time to negotiate the details of the every aspect of the LOI to get into a purchase agreement. Like, what kind of things do you appreciate and say, wow, that was a well-run process?
Yeah, it's going to be tough to add on to Michael's masterclass and how to fend off a retrade. I think that in addition, look, by the way, we spend a lot of time on exit prep. So, 6 to 12 months before we're taking a company to market, we've commenced the exit prep process to start lining up our ducks in exactly the way that Michael described a few minutes ago. I'd say that the only thing I think I can add is that in addition to, the basic blocking and tackling around being organized, having your financials in order, having detailed support for all your adjustments, I think there are some intangibles out there, right? Like having the management team, the ownership team, whatever, having a consistently cohesive story about the business, where it's going. I think, being coached up so that you can demonstrate that you have the ability to answer questions very thoroughly and diligently as they come your way. And then, simple things like being able, and this is Michael's point, I'm just building on it, being able to pull data effectively, like on your feet, because you don't know everything that a buyer's going to come at you with, but it never looks good when they ask you for something and you can't get it. So again, there are simple things that you can get better at and develop muscle memory around that are going to keep things moving at a pace that will get a deal done, because we all know that time is the enemy of deals. And the one last point I would make, just to your question B, is that from our perspective, when we issue an LOI, at that point we've already committed, quite a large amount of time to even get to that stage. But by the time we're in diligence, our objective is to close the deal. So at least from our standpoint, fuzziness, uncertainty, those are enemies, right? If a deal dies for us, that is, a tremendous amount of time and invaluable resources that we're not going to get back. And I think that's the same for, most institutional buyers and strategic buyers, right? Like, I think there were some bad actors out there, but I think most people want to get a deal done.
Let me
great point.
I'm going to add a seventh point to Michael's point, if that's okay, real quick. Really quick,
yeah,
John.
it's got to be real quick though.
Congruency, okay? Yeah. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. If the due diligence surprise is small or medium, then the retrade should be small or medium. There should be congruency and alignment between whatever's discovered and what's being proposed. And where I get upset, and I'm sure Michael gets upset, if I'm on the sell side and the guffaw by the seller has no economic relationship to the ask by the buyer.
Okay, I'm going to add an 8th point too, because I think creating competitive, like a competitiveness to the process and having lots of buyers at the table, like it becomes way easier if there's only one buyer at the table to facilitate a retrade or to kind of push the issue on a retrade than there would be if there's lots of potential buyers. So okay, moving on to the next point here. So Andrew, this one's for you. Like just outside of retrading what's in the LOI, there's so many points that are negotiated within a purchase and sale agreement. Like what are some alternatives to just going back and retrading purchase price or retrading kind of the amount of any sort of vendor financing or earnout? Like can't you just find some points where you win in the reps and warranties or the structure of the deal or something like that?
You're previewing my answer, which is totally fine. It's a dialogue, not a speech. We over focus in the retrade conversation on price, and there's a lot to be done in the issue of terms. So if Tony identifies a risk, it doesn't mean that the seller has to take a $30 million haircut. It could mean that the indemnification is going to be expanded, or the holdback is going to be expanded, or the rep and warranty insurance policy is going to be expanded. I mean, once Tony, because this is one of Michael's points, clearly articulate the reason and then let creative advisors come up with a series of solutions. Please, no attendee on this webinar leave thinking that the only retrade is a price retrade. It can be a terms retrade, and the terms retrade, again, should be congruent with the specific risk identified. The only times I get upset, I mean, I don't like retrades just like Michael doesn't, but the only times I get upset is when there's a disconnect between what's being proposed and the problem that we're trying to solve, right? And so you're right. Any number of pieces of the purchase and sale agreement could be adjusted to address the risk. But there are other alternatives, since you asked the question, is maybe to break the deal out into pieces. Sometimes it's a particular division of the company that's presenting a lot of risk, and maybe we, remove that from the body of the deal, and the retrade isn't really a retrade. It's just you're buying less than you were before, and we're putting some castle walls around the risk. I've seen partial deals, alternative deals, stage deals, one step versus two step. I've seen increases in earnouts, although sellers, that's not a great path to go too far there. All kinds of adjustment of terms, or just walk away and let the parties breathe for a little while. Tony just revealed a secret and a poker reveal. He doesn't want the deal to derail once he's moved forward. So if you know that about Trivest, you know that about other buyers, then use that to your advantage as a seller too. They're not making money if all their deals derail.
Yeah, Tony, you are going to get lots of deal flow after this, but what do you see as like alternatives? And Andrew talked about the one biggest one is just the walk away. But what are some other things that you've seen to say, hey, there's these issues, like we're not going to come back on price in terms, but we're going to do something else, structure, maybe reps and warranties, some of the more kind of nuances within the agreements.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, like, at the risk of coming across somewhat oversimplistic, right? I mean, we kind of see things in pretty binary, right? Like, there's the walk away risk, which we do try to avoid. Honestly, I think our second best option is well, there's two options. One is what you just brought up, time, right? We're okay waiting, right? If both parties truly want to find a way to move forward, and all it's going to take is some time to address something, that's great. We've been around 42 years. We're not going anywhere. And again, if it's a deal that, we have a line on doing and both sides are enthusiastic, we can wait and until things are right. Secondly, yeah, I mean, another one of our policies is that, we close on the terms of an LOI. Okay, so we don't retrade. And therefore, I think in a worst case scenario, if we think that time alone isn't going to get it done, we'll say, okay, well, let's make part of this consideration, the portion that's in question, let's just make it contingent, right? So look, it's an earnout basically, but there's a spectrum of how earnouts can function. Let's just, make that contingent on making sure that everything is aligned. And, again, I think it's a difficult pill to swallow sometimes, but I think like anything in life, if both parties carry themselves, with candor and sincerity and good faith, you can get through it and, not have a bad outcome. And that's certainly not what we want, by the way. And I think everybody here would agree that, one of the biggest dangers down the road of a retrade is that, I'm going back to Andrew's point about getting married. These are marriages, and things like this can fester. So,
right.
You don't want to kind of shoot yourself in the foot before you even put the ring on.
Yeah, that's a great point. Michael, do you want to add to that? What are alternatives to just coming back and grinding on price?
I think Tony described it well. The example I was going to use is during COVID, we had represented a company. People felt there was a COVID bump. And what we did is we just literally pulled it off the market, but we were very specific. When will you know we didn't have a COVID bump? And there was a date certain that a couple of the buyers suggested, and we returned to the market in January and got a transaction closed this year. So that was a good situation, but we wanted to make sure this waiting there was a rationale for it, in a sense, proving that the COVID bump didn't happen. The other thing I would mention is confidence. And so to the extent that someone wants you to roll over 20% and you're willing to roll over 30%, that shows a tremendous amount of confidence if you feel that way. But that's something that, again, goes back to Andrew's point. Conditions can be just as important, if not more important, than purchase price in those situations.
John, one other analogy I've used that helps sellers understand, everyone in this call has probably bought and sold a home, right? You buy a home and it's subject to home inspection. Well, the inspector comes in and says, this toilet's broken. Okay, fine. What's it gonna price? What's the price to fix the toilet or replace the toilet? And let's narrowly focus on the toilet problem as opposed to deciding that the house is no longer valuable or no longer attractive. Let's just fix the toilet. And that's where retrading is completely acceptable. Thought I was buying a house with all functional toilets and something's broken. Let's get it fixed either through price or terms. And it can be that non-adversarial if it's that specific and granular. And frankly, if you're living in the house, you should know if your toilets are working or not.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy there. Tony, we'll quickly move on this topic because not as important to the grand scheme of retrading. But I mean, does the prevalence of retrading change with the change in like the economic and M&A activity? Now we're kind of heading into this potential global recession or fear of a global recession. Do you think retrading might be more prevalent in that kind of environment?
Absolutely. I mean, like anything else, right? I mean,
1,000%.
whoever's holding a stronger hand is going to have the advantage in these sorts of situations. And it works both ways, right? I mean, as we kind of pointed out early in the dialogue, when it's a seller's market, you're going to see more of the reverse retrade, and when it's a buyer's market, that's going to flip a little bit. We're certainly seeing strong signs that the pendulum is shifting back towards a buyer's market. I think that, these days, if a hiccup emerges, it could have an adverse effect on how diligence pans out. Whereas a year or two ago, we might have glossed over it, but absolutely. I mean, it's just kind of the nature of negotiation.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, pretty cut answer, but anybody want to add to that? Just Andrew or Michael?
I think Tony nailed it.
Michael, we'll start with you. Sorry.
Yeah, I would add two things. One, I think the quick answer is yes, it does. Two other reasons would be now factoring in, well, what's the recession's impact on this company? And everyone, comes up with different scenarios. And so if you have a highly cyclical company, that's going to take a much longer time and be much more intense. And then the last thing I would mention is the availability of debt capital. And so in these situations where debt capital, we have a situation where they thought they could get 3 or 3.5 times debt. Unfortunately, they came back and they can't, and now we have a problem. They're not changing the purchase price, but they're now looking for a higher rollover. So debt capital is another one that usually, access to capital goes along with recessions.
Yeah, and cost of capital too, with increasing interest rates.
Yes, and cost of capital. Yeah.
I'll add one quick twist. If the buyer is retrading around an economic condition that we've been talking about for months, like the risk of a recession, then I would submit it's actually Tony's burden to have factored in recession risk in part in his due diligence and in his offer. So if it's something that truly comes out of surprise during the exclusivity period, then I think we've got to have a real dialogue. But I think it's fair to push back on a buyer a little bit if it's something as general as, oh, rising interest rates. Tony can't go, rising interest rates? I had no idea that was going to happen. That's not a fair retrade. I think, if it's something that everyone's aware of and should have been factored into the offer in the first place.
That's a good point. It's a great point.
Yeah, really good point. Michael, just jumping over to you, can you share some stories of successful or unsuccessful retradings that you've seen working with your clients, and really any lessons that came out of that for future dealings with buyers and your clients, your sellers?
Yeah, one of my favorite ones happened right after the 2008 recession, and we were selling an aerospace company, and it was September, and they basically wanted to retrade because of the headlines, and so we took that into consideration. The headlines were very scary that summer, but looked at aerospace stock prices, and frankly, they hadn't moved. It was one of those industries that didn't seem to be infected at all, and so we brought that back to their attention and had a tremendous amount of back and forth. As September rolled in, we all know what happened, and so then we were looking at a situation that we had to compromise, and the way we compromised and the way we negotiated it is we took instead of a $10 million reduction in price, we took $5 million earnout. That we thought we were going to hit, but more importantly, we then took $5 million of their stock. stock, figuring that, that the stock of this company was strategic, will increase and decrease based on the industry's future. We didn't come close to the earnout, so that was, buyer made a good move there. But we took the stock, and the aerospace industry did quite well afterwards and doubled that. And so that was one where we got back to our price by being smart. I think the earnout was something that was frankly smart on the buyer's perspective. But that was a good structuring exercise that worked. Just an asterisk. Right after we gave the stock, the buyer offered to buy back the stock at face value, and I figured that if someone as smart as Trivest is offering to buy back our stock, they know something that we don't know, and luckily we retained the stock, and like I said, the stock doubled in value.
Yeah, great story. Andrew, I'm sure you have thousands of stories on retrades, but give us one of your favorites, and give us the lessons learned from that experience.
Well, I'm just to mix things up a little bit. I'm going to give a seller retrade. We had a local government contracts firm. They were told by the procurement officer that one of their significant contracts was not going to get renewed, that it was a very low chance of getting renewed. It ended up not only being renewed, but tripling in size. The waterfall and the pipeline for this company and the forecast for the company all of a sudden looked very, very exciting. And we had to retrade around price and terms. And we were almost doing, the earnout dialogue, because of the certainty of the government business and the fact that it was being renewed, got a lot smoother because we could come up with specific metrics that we knew weren't going to get disputed. The reason earnouts get a bad name is they're left vague and parties end up disputing whether they've been earned or not. This deal allowed us to be very granular in whether the earnouts were paid or not paid, and it went very smoothly. And literally, the seller's primary job after closing was to just make sure each of the earnouts got hit, and they did. And Michael's right. Most of the time, they don't because of some circumstance. But this time we had upside surprises. And, you see that more often than not in a large customer renewal or government customer renewal that was unexpected during the exclusivity period. And in this case, one of the competing bidders dropped out, and, our guys were kind of a lock. Yeah,
good story. And thanks for mixing it up there with a seller's retrade. Tony, give us one of your stories that you've seen, successful or unsuccessful, and just some of the lessons that you've learned from that.
I've got a quickie. So this one kind of speaks more to the emotional risk of a retrade. So we had a seafood company that we were really interested in acquiring. So it was a few years back. And ultimately, the seller went with a different buyer. It's okay. It was local business, so we knew the owner. Anyhow, as it turns out, one day, the seller is right before a lender meeting. The buyer goes up to the seller in a pizzeria of all places, and out of the blue presents him with a new LOI with a 3% haircut in it. And the owner, who is just notorious for wearing his emotions on his sleeve, picks up the LOI, puts it in front of him, and goes shh, and throws it and just walks out. A couple months later, we catch up with him. He tells us what happened, and we say, well, hey, you know what? We'd be happy to honor the original terms of our LOI that we extended, right before, that. And he said, absolutely, let's do it. And we closed the deal, and we had a great run with them and sold them to Cisco. And we're still in touch with that owner. A lot of deals we do are with business owners who got jilted with a retrade. So you can't count out that emotions are an integral part of all business dealings.
Yeah, as a buyer, and I sometimes kind of try to tell this to my clients, you have to read the room a little bit. And those, sellers that are emotional like that, as soon as they feel that they're being retraded or it's something that's, different than what they shook hands on, there's never going to get a deal done. So you kind of have to sense that a bit.
And just to clarify, that was Cisco with an S, not a Cisco with a C, because I don't think the networking company's buying seafood companies right now. I mean, that would be a expanded version of their world.
Yeah. Okay, I got two other questions in our formal kind of format here or agenda, and then we're going to move on to some questions from the audience. So,
Which have been
this one is
fantastic. If
for
you've
you,
been
Andrew.
following the chat box, John, the questions have been amazing. We almost need a part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely consider that. But let's get to these last 2 questions here. So this is for Andrew. So do you see like the different types of buyers, like strategic versus private equity versus, maybe family offices? Do you see that those different types of buyers have different tactics and different ways of handling a retrade? Or is it kind of, dependent on, very, very, party dependent?
I used to say yes, that they were very different. I mean, Tony hinted at it. He said the B word. He said, look, we're very binary. The tagging the private equity buyer, with, hey, it's all about finance and all about math, used to be a fair tag. I mean, frankly, these days it's much more strategic. There are private equity buyers that really look more strategic depending what's already in their portfolio and what their charter is. There are strategic buyers who have a hardcore CFO and start acting like financial buyers. So I don't think it's fair to bucketize or to assume that the family business office is going to be really nice and invite you over for dinner and give you more money than you expected. So it's hard probably to categorize. What I would do is reiterate Michael's point, and that is do the due diligence, look at the prior deals that they've done, how often they retrade, and what is their technique for retrading if you can get to that level of granularity from your advisors, because it is going to be, at least more often than not, that Tony's going to come in with a price retrade because the economic valuation has changed, whereas a strategic buyer may be more interested in a wider range of solutions because they're typically looking for a piece of technology or a distribution channel or some other reason they're buying the company that might be a little easier to fix than a price adjustment.
Yeah, awesome. Michael, your views on this. Do you see that different types of buyers approach retrades differently?
No, I agree with exactly how Andrew answered the question. I used to say, gee, I think it was really important if that CEO was so critically important to the buyer, whoever the buyer was, you probably have a higher bar for when that buyer decides to retrade. Do you want to tick off that guy or gal right in the very beginning of the transaction? But you know what? Right now, I'd say we see about 50-50. There's no difference whatsoever. And
Totally
when
agree.
you have a key CEO, if it's a big issue, it's going to be raised.
Okay, awesome. Tony,
John, one last thing on that.
Yeah, just
and
real quick.
Tony hinted at it, is auction versus non-auction. It's not type of buyer, but it's process. If it's an auction situation and you try and retrade and the seller knows there's like 6 other people waiting in line, it's going to be a much harder retrade, which goes to Tony's pizza parlor story.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next question, because I think we can touch on that on the next question. But, Tony, what are the consequences with retrading? I mean, you guys have taken the position that you just don't retrade. And that's probably, just to maintain your, the integrity and your reputation. But what are some consequences for parties that do retrade that you see on the marketplace?
Yeah, I liked this question a lot. So thank you for adding this to the list, whoever from the audience submitted this one. So look, we think a lot about this, and everybody's heard the adage, reputation takes, a lifetime to build and a moment to destroy. And we really take that to heart. I'll give a few examples of why retrading, you have to do it at your own risk. And this is one of the reasons among many that, we just do not do it. But look, if you burn enough founders out there with a retrade, you're going to poison the well for yourself in that industry, because let's face it, a lot of these people know each other. They talk to each other. They see each other at conferences. Oftentimes they tell each other if they're thinking about doing something, not always, but sometimes, and word gets around. I mean, a lot of industries aren't that big, and, M&A isn't that big, it's kind of a small world. Similarly, if you start retrading people too often, or even not even that often, in front of deal sources, an investment bank, a boutique bank, a lawyer who referred you in to a trusted client, now they're going to stop showing you deals too, because you just made them look like a fool. And look, that's a small world also. You don't want, one broker, boutique bank telling another boutique bank, hey, I just was made to look like a fool by, Trivest or somebody else, don't show them any more deals. I mean, that is anathema to how we want to run things here. What's next? Well, then your competition is going to start hearing about it. So other PE groups are going to say, hey, those guys down the street, don't talk to them because they retrade. I think another risk people don't think about, and we see this a lot here at Trivest, is, nobody wants to be the guy, who has to retrade a founder and know they're doing it in bad faith. And so there are at least 3 people at this firm who voted with their feet and they said, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't want to be a jerk. And, we have a culture of retrading here, and some places do. And they left, and they came here in large part because they heard about our no retrading policy, and, they're much happier here, and they build that into their pitch. Second point is, even if you do win the retrade, it's not the best way to start a 4 to 5 to 6 year relationship. Again, kind of like a marriage. And I would add another one. Look, for us, our founders and CEOs who we've transacted with, they are, from a marketing perspective and a BD perspective, a huge force multiplier. We put them in front of business owners all the time to talk to them about their experience working with us. We give their phone numbers to potential sellers to say, call any of them, right? Just don't tell us, just reach out. And, we do that because we know that we don't have anything to hide. And on the contrary, I think without exception, all of our business owners, feel like they're part of the family. And so, again, common sense, I think, really has to prevail. And these are relationships, part of it's business, but part of it's relationship. So M&A, you can't, I forget it was Andrew or Michael who made this point earlier, knowing your buyer, a smart seller is going to know their buyer. And one of the first things you're going to hear about when they do their diligence is, these guys retrade, they're jerks. That's not going to help you do more deals.
Yeah.
The hose before the close.
The hosing before the closing.
The hose
Thank
before
you.
the close. That's something that you brought up, Tony, and I appreciate you for that phrase. Michael, pass this off to you. So what are some consequences that you see, maybe from the seller's perspective? So somebody comes back and retrades, you guys don't accept it. How easy would it be to go back to the other previous buyers that you didn't enter into exclusivity with? Or is there a real challenge in kind of now restarting the process?
Tony described, it's very, very difficult. There's an emotional component involved, especially on day 90. You go back to number 2 bidder, and what they find out? Why am I the lucky guy? What did they find out? And it's a very, very difficult conversation. So it's not as easy as it seems. A lot of sellers that we know are like real tough guys, and they say, well, I'm not gonna have any problem whatsoever. You know what? They'll end up, going back to number 2 is very, very difficult. So it's not. I think what happens is, and Tony described it pretty well, and we have one CEO who literally can't help himself, but he's so ticked off about it. He brings it up in every single board meeting, this retrade that happened. And it was just, we can't help it. And then I think the other thing that Tony mentioned is sell side firms won't show them deals. I would say that we may show them some deals, but if there's a horse race between 2, they are always going to be told that story, and they will most likely always lose. So, you can forgive but not forget. And so that's a cost that people don't, unless some private equity firms just don't fully appreciate. Obviously, Tony does.
Yeah. Andrew, you want to add to that with
just to reiterate Tony's point, and please, everybody on this webinar know this, it's a small networked world. I've known Michael 35 years. Yeah. John, I've known you 10 years. I'm recently meeting Tony, but I've known Trivest for many years. We all know each other. We know each other's habits. Tony said it beautifully. If you're going to make this your best practice, you're going to be outed, and you're going to be outed sooner than later. There's a relatively small group of lawyers and accountants and investment bankers that work in the middle market, lower middle market, and a lot of us know each other, and we go to the same meetings and we talk to each other. So don't think that you can do it and no one's going to find out.
Yeah. And Tony also gave us the phrase, the hosing at the closing. So that's awesome. Okay, guys, we got through the agenda, which I'm super proud of. Now we're going to move on to some questions.
There's only 35 of them. Don't worry.
Yeah, I won't get to all of them for sure. But one question I did get through LinkedIn So how often, if at all, has transaction advised sell clients, or sorry, have you advised your sell side clients? And I'll ask this to Michael, to add language specifically in like the LOI or some of the marketing documents that prohibit retrades? Like, have you ever done that? Where you say,
No.
hey, we're not accepting any retrades?
No. I mean,
It would be unenforceable. It would, I'm just telling you, as the lawyer, it'd be viewed as a ridiculous clause. Tony, as a buyer, would never sign it because it's basically saying there will be no negotiation. And I would just barf all over that if I were on the buy side.
Michael, you want to add to that?
I like the barfing part. So
Okay.
I'm not going to add anything to it in the interest of time.
Yeah, but what could you do? I mean, you could be really upfront with the buyer.
You could have a
and say, "Hey, guys, like,
penalty, you could
we're
have a
really
breakup
not-"
fee.
So let me
Yeah.
tell you, I should have. What we tend to do is when we have a 90-day exclusive, say we want to get confirmation on the purchase price and terms and conditions on day 30 or day 45. Push that as quickly as possible. So when there is an issue, we're not going back 90 days, but we're going back in 30 or 45 days. That is very effective because it has people focused on the most important things early on and it's a lot less painful hearing on day 30 or day 45 than day 89.
Right. And why do you think Q of E has crept into the process? Because everyone has said one of the big retrade items is that the earnings fall apart or the forecast fall apart. Q of E's are designed to reduce that risk. And to Michael's point, they're usually ready, in somewhere halfway through the exclusivity period or even prior to the exclusivity period, which reduces the retrade risk.
Yeah, it's a great point that we haven't touched with around the quality of earnings and really doing sell side due diligence early and upfront and providing a lot of that information to prospective buyers. Tony, I mean that must when you see a process that's run like that, you must be really pleased to know that information and that level of diligence has been done prior. It probably makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like we said earlier, we don't want slowdowns. We don't want uncertainties. We like to see commitment from, both sides. We literally can't afford to fail that often. We can lose a deal here or there if it just isn't going to work out. But, in our business, we have to be closing deals. So yeah, definitely we want to see, those are great signs to see on the other side.
Okay, we have a couple of questions here just around buyer due diligence. So like really kind of the seller, reversing the tables and trying to, assess, does the buyer have the capability, the wherewithal, the, history of being able to close deals. Maybe Michael, I'll ask you that question. Like, what do you do for your clients to do buyer due diligence?
One of the most effective things is we ask for the last 5 companies that they've purchased, and we'd like to speak to all. We don't know if we call all 5 unless there's an issue. And we ask them, tell us about the LOI and tell us about the closing and how close were they. Sometimes we'll actually say, tell us the difference between the two. That way they can't get out of an easy answer. But that's something that it's amazing how many people accept an LOI and don't even make those phone calls. You learn a lot. Very often the CEOs are not beholden to those buyers, and they tell you things, a lot. How can you streamline the process? How can you make it less painful? And so that would be my top recommendation. Sometimes we check if it's a specific PE firm in a local town. We may ask some of our friends in that particular town and just ask around. It's a major decision, and buyers have to do their own due diligence. There's nothing like time spent.
Okay, quickly, we're coming up against the hour. So last points, Andrew, and then we'll go Tony, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, last point, just to build on what Michael said, and this will sound self-serving, it's not intended to. Hire the right team of advisors. For God's sakes, get advisors that know what's market, that have done this 150 to 300 times, and that's just last week. I mean, you'll get much better retrading advice and insights as to whether particular buyers retrade or not if you're using a resource team that knows what they're doing and it's not their first or second time. So, Michael's got the reputation he does for a reason. He's been active in this market for a long time. I think I'm almost as long of a time. And, it's our job to know who does what and have ideas on how to navigate through it. So You know, if you're thinking about buying or selling companies and you're using the guy that, you know, handled your divorce or, you know, your real estate dispute, I would say that's a bad idea.
Awesome. Okay, guys, we're a minute past the hour. So guys, this was an absolute masterclass on this topic of retrading. Andrew, Tony, Michael, I'm so grateful and appreciative that you guys were able to join me. To all of our guests, thanks for attending. So if anybody wants to reach out to Andrew, Tony, or Michael, LinkedIn, is that probably the best way?
Sure.
Okay.
LinkedIn's
We'll
perfect.
say LinkedIn. You guys can find everybody there. Everyone have an awesome day, and thanks again.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.